Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I want to look at the week starting on Monday, July the 7th, 2025. And this video is a preview. I will be looking at the main astrological events taking place this week. And I will also be looking at the week from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I'll be doing an I Ching reading for the week, which will be looking at the general picture, then money, then career and business, and finally relationships. Now, as far as my topic is concerned, I always have an astrological topic, and in this video my topic is not going to be astrology, it's going to be the I Ching itself. And I do want to look at some of the issues relating to the I Ching, perhaps some of its limitations, and also how the I Ching compares with the tarot, because certainly from a probabilistic view, there are some major differences between the tarot and the I Ching. And yes, probability and statistics, do matter with the I Ching, because there is a strong mathematical basis to this oracle. But before I look at these probabilistic and statistical matters, I just want to look at the week as a whole. So here is the chart for the beginning of the week. So this chart is set for midnight on Monday, July the 7th, 2025, and which is a Monday. And so the week starts with the moon at 2 degrees 58 Sagittarius. So New York time, we can see that the moon is just entering into Sagittarius, and additionally it's making an opposition to Uranus. So that moon opposition Uranus might define the week, because at the beginning of a week the sun is actually pretty close to a semi-square with Uranus. So the week starts on quite a dramatic note, and you will notice that right at the beginning of a week, Uranus is at 29 degrees 59.6 arc minutes. So Uranus is on the verge of moving into Gemini, and indeed, on Monday the 7th, the changeover happens, and I think that this is a major event. And in my video where I look at Monday the 7th, specifically, I will be going into great detail, at least I hope it's going to be great detail, on the subject of Uranus moving into Gemini. And as I've said on numerous occasions in previous videos, in the past, Uranus in Gemini has often, has in fact invariably coincided with the United States being at war. Uranus was in Gemini at the time of the Declaration of Independence, and it was in Gemini during the Civil War. It was in Gemini went into Gemini in 1942, just after Pearl Harbor, and it's going to go into Gemini on Monday. And as far as the noise, I'm making this video right at the beginning of July the 5th, and 12:32 a.m. on July the 5th, and they haven't quite stopped with the fireworks. I think legally, according to city code, they're supposed to stop by 11, but they're not. Anyway, I have to go on. And so looking at this, Uranus and Gemini, I do think that it is moving into Gemini. It's not just a one-off. I can say, well, it happened on a Monday, and Tuesday is a new day. It's a change that is going to last on and off for the next 7 years. Now, it's true that the Uranus does go retrograde. It will move out of Gemini and back into Taurus later in the year. I mean, let's be precise about that. So Uranus moves out of Gemini beginning of November. So it's not here for good. It's just a taste, perhaps, of Uranus in Gemini, and then next year, 2026, it will move into Gemini and it will stay in Gemini. So that is a major event. Then, later in the week, on Thursday, the 10th of July, we've got a full moon. So we've got a full moon. I think the full moon is sort of around 1819 Capricorn. And so, the lunation cycle is reaching its peak. You will see the full moon in the sky, and there will be plenty to talk about. And the final event takes place right at the end of the week, on Sunday the 13th, and that is Saturn going stationary. So we've just had Neptune going stationary retrograde, and now we're going to have Saturn going stationary retrograde. And that is a reminder that Saturn and Neptune are very close to one another. And, we can almost say that there is a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is not exact, but it's as close as it gets this year, I think. And so Saturn and Neptune, needs to be described. I've got Saturn-Neptune square in my own chart. I was born the end of May 1962, and when there was a close Saturn-Neptune square. So perhaps at some level I'm tuned into the Saturn-Neptune cycle, and I do want to have a video, hopefully over the next week, where I look at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in more detail and consider, what it might mean. So to summarize, there are three big events this week. I mean, there are probably more than that, but the three events that I really noticed that I really want to focus on is Uranus moving into Gemini on Monday the 7th, we've got a full moon on Thursday the 10th, and we've got Saturn going stationary retrograde on Sunday the 13th. So now I want to switch and look at the I Ching, and it's going to be something of a monologue. I'm not going to sort of show you anything. I'm not really set up for that. But if you've been watching my videos, you will have noticed that every single day I do an I Ching reading, and there is a question about the I Ching reading, or a number of questions about it. How unique is it? That should be important. If you give someone a reading, it should be unique and perhaps unrepeatable. And that is not the case with the I Ching, as I'll sort of mention in a moment. And that's kind of what distinguishes it from the tarot. Now, tarot cards, I got into tarot cards before I got into the I Ching. And so, tarot is something that I have been familiar with for a long time. Although what happened was I sort of moved away from the tarot, and I do tarot card readings, very, very rarely. I own 2 tarot packs. One of the tarot packs, it's some no-name tarot pack. I didn't buy it. I just happened to have this tarot pack, and I don't like this tarot pack. I probably should buy buy the Crowley pack, but this pack is something that I'm not really very comfortable with, but I don't use it very often. Then there's the other tarot pack I've got. I've got another tarot pack which I've never used. I can't use it. That's right, I've got a tarot pack I cannot use. And the reason I cannot use it is because, I got this tarot pack at the beginning of the century. I think I bought it in 2001, 2002, and I paid a lot of money for it. I think I paid 300 UK pounds for this tarot pack, and which is more now, which would have been $500 in old money, perhaps with the exchange rate then, and certainly in modern money it's probably about $1,000, and I'm sure I paid too much for it. So the question is, why did I pay £300 for a tarot pack? And the reason was that I was doing horoscopes for a cell phone company. I was doing contract work for them, and I did have a tarot. I was planning on doing a tarot section, where I'd do a tarot reading which would be automated, and I wrote all of the all of the descriptions of the tarot, and I sort of managed to put together a script to show how this automated tarot reading worked. And there was this question about illustrating this, perhaps as a web-based format. So you might have a tarot reading, and you'd see the tarot cards appear. But then I was thinking about this at the time, and I was thinking, well, there's a copyright issue. Where would I get a tarot pack that I could put on a website? And so how would I avoid the copyright issue? And so my solution to the problem was to find a tarot pack that was out of copyright. So I found someone in Germany who was selling old tarot packs. So I bought this pack of tarot cards, which I paid £300. I had to pay it in Deutschmarks because he was in Germany, and that was before the euro came in. And so it was an 1890s pack of tarot cards. Now, because it's an 1890s pack of tarot cards, I mean, I'm sure it's not worth that much. It didn't come with a box. I wasn't really interested in the box. I just wanted the tarot cards. And of course, because it's so old, and it was pretty old when I bought it. It was now it's even older. So it must be 130 years old, this pack of tarot cards. And you can tell that it's old because if you look at a modern pack of tarot cards, or any card, it's got sort of curved edges. This pack of tarot cards has not got curved edges. It's got straight corners. And so I've got this pack of tarot cards. I can't use it. I mean, how can I possibly use it I don't know how much it's worth. Quite a few $100s probably still, even though I did pay too much for it. But the first time I would shuffle it or cut these cards, I'd ruin it. So anyway, they're just sitting in a drawer because I've got nothing to do with them. So that's me in the tarot. But the thing about the tarot is, and the one sort of perhaps advantage of the tarot is that essentially each reading is unique if you think about it from a probabilistic perspective. So, and that's assuming you don't even reverse the cards. So you imagine you have a tarot pack, and let's say you've got a 10-card reading. So 10-card reading, and that excludes the significator. So you might take a significator. So, for example, I don't know if would be doing tarot card reading for myself. Maybe I'm a Gemini, so I might take the King of Swords to represent me. So that's a significator. Then I've got to choose 10 more cards. So the next card, well, I've got the chances of any remaining card coming up will be 1 in 77, and then the next card will be 1 in 76, and then 1 in 75, and you run it through. And then you calculate the odds, like 1 over 77 times 1 over 76 times 1 over 75 times 1. You come up with the number of possible permutations of tarot cards, which is just almost infinite. Obviously, it's not quite infinite. You can actually put a number on it, but it's so large. There are so many permutations that it is effectively unique. I mean, obviously not theoretically, and so whenever you do a tarot card reading, it's something quite unique. Now, you cannot say the same for the I Ching, and there are several ways of doing I Ching. Now, if you want to be strict about it, you do the yarrow stalks, and I'm not going to go into the details about the yarrow stalks, but it basically you have a yarrow plant. You can pick them yourself. Yarrow is quite a common plant, and you take the stalks, and you have where you divide the stalks, and you come up with the hexagram that way, and it's time consuming. It takes, I don't know, didn't really time it, but at least 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. It takes time. And the yarrow stalks I've got, when I do it, they have tiny little splinters on them. So after doing it, they're not terrible splinters, but I feel my fingers have got these bits of yarrow embedded in them, and so they're not that comfortable to use. And so it's kind of easier to use the coins. Now, the yarrow stalks have particular probabilities of particular combinations coming up, and they're not the same as the coins. And that is a criticism of the coins. Okay, there are ways where you can use the coins to duplicate the odds of the yarrow stalk, but I don't really want to go into that complication. So as far as the probability is concerned, you think of the basic coin toss. You toss a coin, heads or tails. Well, you've got 50-50. And that's how you think of it. But with the tarot, you have got 6 lines, and if you're using coins and you're not making any adjustments to fit the yarrow odds, then you throw 3 coins 6 times. And when you throw 3 coins once, there are 4 possible outcomes. You can have 2 heads and a tail. You can have 2 tails and a head. You can have all heads, you have all tails. So that means that you can work it out mathematically. So if you say you've got 4 different possible outcomes, 4 to the power of 6, that comes to 4,096. So in fact, with the I Ching, there are only 4,096 possible readings. And so you might have noticed that sometimes, occasionally, a reading repeats itself. Okay, not how I interpret it, that doesn't repeat itself, but the actual hexagrams will inevitably repeat themselves. And it has happened where I think I repeated myself on the following day. And because there are only 4,096 possible readings to be done. And that, you could say that is a real problem with the I Ching. You compare that with the tarot, where every tarot reading is totally unique. And what is the counter-argument? Well, the counter-argument would say that maybe there's something magical about 4,096. Perhaps there are 4,096 ways of being. And of course, the I Ching itself is based on 64 hexagrams. So 2 to the power of 6 is 64. So you have these 64 hexagrams, but they can manifest in different ways. And for example, if you've watched my readings, you'll see that there are moving lines, and sometimes you get no moving lines. You can get 6 moving lines. You can get a maximum of 6. And the probabilities of getting different numbers of moving lines in a reading, does change. So the probability of the percentage probability of getting no moving lines, of having a locked hexagram, is 17.8%. The probability of getting just 1 moving line is 35.6%. Of 2 moving lines, 29.7%. 3 moving lines, 13.2%. 4 moving lines, 3.3%. 5 moving lines, 0.4%. 6 moving lines, like all the lines moving, very close to 0. So that is a very sort of unlikely possibility. And so, I have mentioned that there are 4,096 possible readings available with the I Ching. But, some individual readings are more likely than others. So let's say you take the hexagram, the creative. So the creative is when all the lines are unbroken. The probability of getting all the lines unbroken and then the bottom line breaking and you moving to hexagram number 44. Now, the probability of that happening is about approximately 1 in 1,079. So it's unlikely, but it will happen. Every now and then. And the probability, let's say the probability of getting all your lines unbroken, but it being completely locked. Well, the chances of that, so for example, the creative locked, well, the chances of that are approximately 1 in 360. But what about the probability of having all your lines unbroken, like the creative, and then it moving to the receptive? In other words, every single unbroken line moving to a broken line. Well, in that case, I may have got my calculations wrong, but I did try to double check it. The chances of getting that happening is 1 in 262,144. So, probability is something that one always has to consider with the I Ching. So, I thought I'd talk about the I Ching and math and the fact that there are a finite number of readings, and you might regard that as being a disadvantage. But it could be that 4,096 is some magical number. Maybe at some esoteric level, there are 4,096 different types of experience. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that's true, but it is a possibility. And yeah, there is something so mathematical about the I Ching. It is something very, very logical, and using the coins with rather than a yarrow stalk, it's very much linked with a sort of binomial theorem. If you're into mathematics and probability, the binomial concept is pretty important. So let's now actually do the I Ching for the week. And I just remember, if you don't want your I Ching done, you don't have to have your I Ching done. You can stop watching a video right now if that's what you want, because this I Ching reading only applies to those who actually watch it, who watch this the I Ching section. So I asks the question, what is the week starting on Monday, July the 7th, 2025 going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And remember, there are 4 subsections to this section. There is general, then money, then career and business, and finally relationships. And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 59, and this is dispersion, and the hexagram doesn't move. There are no moving lines. So remember, this is just the general view of the week. And so if we've got no moving lines, regardless of what the hexagram is about, it may indicate that not much is going on this week. So, think about what your plans are for this week. Were you expecting a lot of things to be happening? Were you expecting action? And it doesn't seem to be the case. Seems that things could be a bit slow, and they might seem rather stuck. But on the plus side, maybe there's not much to worry about, because there isn't much action. Now, as far as what this hexagram actually means, it is dispersion. It's connected with the rain, and the rains come and they wash everything away, and it can be quite troubling. We're caught in a rainstorm, getting swept up. This is a very serious rainstorm. It's not just any rainstorm, and we're swept up and we're moved from one place to another. If you want to see it in a different way, it might be just stuck in a washing machine, or a storm where just everything gets turned upside down, and we might think that it's all completely hopeless. We've just lost the plot. We've lost control, and we don't know where we're going, and we're just getting picked up by the wind, almost sort of like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. And where are we gonna land? And the key thing is, no need to panic. It's all for the good, and things are getting cleaned out, and perhaps things really needed to get cleaned out. There was just a lot of mess was forming. There were things from the past that we should have been able to move on from, but we haven't, and the rains come and they just clear everything away. And this hexagram might actually represent progress, because we get picked up by the storm and we get moved somewhere else. And it's quite possible that in that movement we make some progress, though we shouldn't forget that there are no moving lines. So we might have this sort of feeling of panic. This storm is all around us, and where is it taking us? Maybe it's actually not taking us anywhere, and so certainly no need for panic. And to get some underlying understanding of this hexagram, when you've got a locked hexagram, it's always good to look at the nuclear hexagram. And the nuclear hexagram is when you knock off the top and the bottom hexagram, the top and the bottom lines. Knock off the top line, look at the third, fourth, and fifth lines, and then knock off the bottom line, and then you look at the second, third, and fourth line. So if you knock off the top and bottom lines, you get the nuclear hexagram. The nuclear hexagram is hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. And the corners of the mouth, at first, is sort of a bit puzzling. How does that really inform us? And it may be the case that, when we're in a state of panic, when we feel that everything is falling apart, our response does matter. And it's what we say that matters. What do people say when they're under pressure? And it may not be what we say, but it may be what someone else says. When the storm is upon us, and when we're thinking that everything is going to get washed away, what are the first words that we say? And sometimes those first words can reveal a huge amount. For example, when some people are under a lot of pressure, when there's a panic situation, they can sometimes act in a very unselfish way. They can put themselves last, or they can do the opposite. They can only think about their own interests. And so do listen carefully to what people say when they're under pressure. And because it may not just be you who are in a state of panic. Remember, when I say panic, nothing bad is going to happen in the end, but there might be this perception that there could be a problem, and what we say really could be of significance. And so watch what you say and listen, because that may just say so much about the underlying situation. So that's the general picture. And now let's move to money. And so, from a financial perspective, dispersion is not a particularly relaxed hexagram. It does indicate that we don't know what's going on, and financially there may be things happening that are worrying. How do you deal with a chaotic situation? There's a lot of apparently there's a lot of pressure. And we feel we might have to respond to something, or we might be afraid, if there's a literal weather event, we might think that it's going to cost us money. I mean, if the heavens open, or if there's a massive storm and something gets knocked down, then we think, what that's going to cost. That might be one view. And, but we're just aware that things are changing, and it may be just looking at the financial news, looking at perhaps what the markets are doing, or what we think the markets might be about to do, and there just could be this just ongoing worry. And the thing is that when there is this state of panic, when things are being sort of washed away, we're beginning to see the truth of the matter. And if we think about it, we're not necessarily getting damaged by it. In fact, we're not getting damaged by it at all. So over the week, financially, you may be worried. You may feel that your financial resources could literally be swept away. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. And remember, the hexagram is locked. And because the hexagram is locked, there are just limits to how far things can go. And so, really, really important not to panic. I mean, there's no harm in being cautious. We live in dangerous times. All of us live in dangerous times. And to get some idea about what's really going on, we might want to look at the nuclear hexagram. The nuclear hexagram is 27, the corners of the mouth. And it just could be that in everyone's panic, you hear something, someone says something, and that tells you a lot. Or you might say something, and then you get a response. I mean, that might be one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, with the corners of the mouth, you you have to ask, the corners of the mouth is about what feeds you, not just what feeds you, but what feeds other people. And when there is a storm, people are more panicked, are more security orientated. What are their first priorities? What feeds them? And you might actually start to see the truth about someone, and you might perhaps see their relationship with money. Perhaps you might see their greed or their selfishness for the first time, and that could inform you. But it could also be your own selfishness. And perhaps you might give too much away. You might say something perhaps about money because you're in a state of concern. You say something about money, and that might give a bad impression. So, do be careful what you say. If financial issues, start coming to the fore. And then we have got career and business. And so the first hexagram we have is dispersion. And remember, no moving lines. So as there is no moving lines, you can't necessarily expect anything to be happening this week. But that doesn't mean to say that you can just ignore everything. You might feel when you look at your work, assuming your work is relevant. Maybe you're not working. Maybe it's not important. But it does seem that things are rather up in the air, and no one's quite sure what's going on. And there could be just this feeling that events are just waiting to sweep everything away. And if you're working in a company, you may be worrying about company policy, company decisions. Yeah, it does look dangerous. And the question is, will it develop? I think because it's locked, it's possible that it doesn't develop. So at work, it is a dangerous situation, or at least it feels like a dangerous situation. But if you keep your cool, I don't think actually much is going to change. And likewise, if you're running your own business, you may not be sure what's going on, and you might be inclined to panic. You might be inclined to assume the worst. But I think it's probably unnecessary. And with the nuclear hexagram of 27, I'm looking at the nuclear hexagram because the main hexagram was locked. When people are concerned, when people are not sure how the future is going to work out for them, they might give clues about what they're thinking. And so if you're going into work and there is a bit of tension, do try to pay attention to what's being said, and that just might give you important clues. And also think about what you're saying. Perhaps you shouldn't say anything, and if you do say something, well, that might make a difference. It could make a difference in quite a fortunate way. So if you are in a situation at work where you don't really know what's going on and you're imagining all sorts of things, with the corners of the mouth as the nuclear hexagram, perhaps it's a time to just ask. Say something. Say you're not sure what's going on. Say you need clarification. And those simple words may get an answer, and that answer may make things a lot clearer. And finally, there is relationships. And so relationships, we've got the main hexagram, dispersion, but with no moving lines. And this might indicate in a general sense, but in relationships, not much is happening. If you're not in a relationship, well, that's the way it is short term. If you're in a relationship, can you expect a huge amount of change in terms of the underlying relationship between you and your partner? Not necessarily. But it might also feel that the air has been cleared, because if you've got a storm coming, if it's raining, then that clears out all the dust and the pollution, and all the misunderstandings can be swept away, and things can actually change. Now, I don't think they're necessarily going to change that much because the hexagram is locked, but you will certainly feel that things need to be changed. That things just need to be made crystal clear, that you want to sort of clear the past. And it could well be that there are people from the past, relationships from the past, which are sort of lingering into the future, but you just want them all cleared out. And you want to clear the decks. So that might be one way of working things through. But if you want to stay in a relationship with someone, maybe there have been recent complications, and dispersion perhaps allows you to clear them and perhaps to some extent start afresh. And so that is a positive way in which one can look at dispersion. And how do you start afresh? Well, the underlying hexagram, the nuclear hexagram, is 27, the corners of the mouth. And the corners of the mouth may be about speaking, things having to be said. And so if you really want to clean the decks in terms of a relationship, or perhaps a series of relationships, it may be that you just have to be open and honest through talking, through frank discussion. So that might be one approach. An alternative approach, the corners of the mouth, you think about food perhaps, and having a meal, going out to a restaurant with another person, for example, or you don't have to go to a restaurant, you can eat in your own home or someone else's home, or shared food might be a way in which you and someone else can resolve matters, or perhaps start something. So that's another way of looking at the corners of the mouth. But the corners of the mouth, this hexagram, just remember, it is giving additional information. And fundamentally, as far as relationships are concerned, something does have to be cleared out, and something has to be maybe even reset. So that's why you get why we get this idea of a storm. But at the same time, with no moving lines, I'm not saying that things are going to be super dramatic. And maybe this is just telling you what could happen or what should happen. And it might be up to you to create the storm, but it should be a storm of your making, and perhaps a storm that you have some control of, or at least if you don't have control of it, you can at least have some understanding of its underlying dynamics. So that is the week starting on July the 7th. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.